Hello, this is Aitana, and you are listening to Season 1 of the Swimming the Strait podcast, where we talk with swimmers of all sorts from the New Zealand swimming arena, from swimming every day through the winter to crossing the Cook Strait. We will hear stories of passion, perseverance, and dedication. Welcome to episode 4 of Season 1 of Swimming the Strait. Today's guest holds an impressive track record. She is the first Irish woman to swim the English Channel at the age of 17. She has crossed Taupo, Forcen-Vazquez and Cook Strait in New Zealand, and she will be attempting for the third time the North Channel later this year. I have the pleasure to talk today to Gráinne Moss. Hello Gráinne, how are you? Thank you very much for joining us today in Swimming in the Strait podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I am very excited to chat about swimming with you today. I have so many questions and I want to hear so many stories. I think my first question is always the same. Have you always been a swimmer?
Yes, I have actually always been a swimmer. So my dad was a bit of a swimmer and a water polo player. He taught me to swim, and it's actually a really nice story. I was swimming with him in the swimming pool. I was about 6, and a coach came up to my dad in Ireland and said, "Your daughter has one of the best natural techniques I've ever seen.
Wow.
And I'd really like to train her. I think she could be very good." My dad apparently was, don't know, she's quite young and swimming's quite hard work, all that getting up early in the morning. But apparently at 6 years old, I can't remember this, but I was very determined and really, really wanted to be a swimmer and really wanted to do the training. So I started to train with a lovely man called Pat Simpson in a place called Gráinne in Northern Ireland. And kind of the rest is history. So I've basically swum fairly frequently since the age of 6.
Wow, that is very impressive. Yes. 6 is very young and very determined from such a young age.
Yeah, I mean, what was lovely about Pat actually coached quite a range of people. So I got to train with people who were training for example, Paralympics, trained with a range of like older people, younger people. So I really enjoyed that part of it. It was very kind of inclusive. And then when we were about 11, because of my dad's job, we moved to Bangor in Northern Ireland. And what was interesting there was a very active club, and they had an awful lot more pool time than the club that I had been with in Gráinne. And once, when I was with Pat, I was winning kind of silver medals at Irish championships, Irish school championships. When I went to Bangor, I started to win gold medals. And the primary reason for that was actually just had more and more time, actually to do the training, because they had more and more pool time. So I've been swimming pretty actively since 6. Got my first international cap at 16 when I swam for Ireland in the first World Championships, Open Water World Championships in Lake Windermere. And look, I swam at a pretty high level till I was about 31, and then I had got married at that point, and then I started to have some babies. So I did back off a little bit when I was having my kids. I'm very fortunate to have 4 children, so definitely didn't swim very often or nearly as much. But when the youngest was about 2, I thought, I'm not getting any fitter. I might be getting a little bit fatter, and it's time to get back in the pool. So my youngest is now 12. So probably about 10 years ago, I started to do a bit more. And then a couple of years ago, decided I wanted to get back into some really long swims. So probably been training very hard for the last couple of years in comparison to maybe the 10 years before that.
That's very inspiring that you can have a successful swimming career and then just stop for a bit to do other things, and then you find your time again and go, okay, I'm going to pick it up when I left it and just keep having a great career.
Yeah, I think what you have to be able to do is realise that you can't be as fast. And you do, I know I've met a number of people who've really struggled with that. I did a speech one time about my swimming, and actually somebody in the audience started to cry, and they came up to me afterwards and they said, you've managed to, be very good at one point. And look, I'm still a good swimmer, but I'm nothing compared to what I was, kind of in my 20s, I'm not as fast. And she said, but you've kind of come to terms with that? And I said, I have. And she had been an international triathlete, and she was finding it very difficult to come to terms with the fact that, lots of people were beating her. She hadn't been beaten before. She was no longer at that level. And I talked to her about it. It's also about choices. I mean, if you choose to have a family, you choose to have a career, you just can't be at the top of your game on everything. But actually, you're at the top of your game for you.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
What's success for you? And I said, look, success for me when I had 4 kids was getting in the pool 3 times a week.
I bet that was a huge success. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I had a chat with a swimmer a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about that. How do you define success? And I guess in different stages of life, success looks different. And you just have to, make the most of it. And
and I think with open water swimming as well, success is very personal. I mean, open water swimming, particularly the long swims, are a very personal challenge. I don't think anybody can know, what it means to you, intimately. I mean, you know what it means to you. I mean, I have done swims, and I have finished the vast majority of my swims, but there is one swim that I didn't finish, which was probably about 30 years ago. I tried to swim from Ireland to Scotland, and I didn't finish that. I got really badly stung by jellyfish 2 hours into the swim. I was still swimming 10 hours later, but my strength had gone because of the poison put into my muscles. Now, I saw that as a complete success. Because I knew that what I'd been through, most other swimmers wouldn't actually have still been in the water after they'd been so badly stung. I mean, I didn't get stung by one jellyfish. I basically swam through a swarm of jellyfish and was covered from head to toe. So, I was actually really kind of uplifted by that swim and thought, hey, I've done great. Now other people might have gone, oh, are you really disappointed? You must be sad. And I just wasn't. So I think with open water swimming, you do need to have a pretty flexible mindset when it comes to success.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think so too, because also I think the open water swimming is not only the event, it's the journey that takes you there.
Yeah.
So it is not, well, I mean, I have never swum competitively in the pool, but I think with the events in open water swimmer, it just looks different for each person.
Yeah.
So I have so many questions about all of this already. So, for example, when did you, because you swam English Channel when you were 16, right?
17. Yeah,
17. Yeah. So, and you had been a pool swimmer before.
Yeah.
So how do you go from being a pool swimmer to decide that you want to swim the English Channel?
Yeah, sure. Well, where I lived in Bangor was beside the sea, and we had this open water swimming pool that was full of seawater that was absolutely freezing. But we would go there for a fun night every Thursday. It makes me laugh, fun. I mean, it was, the gales were blowing, it was so cold. I was a little, very skinny kind of teenager. I would look quite blue. People would look at me and go, she really shouldn't be that good at open water swimming. So what happened was we started to do fun races in the sea, and I just turned out to be quite good at them. And then the swims got longer and longer as I got taller and taller. And then at 16, the first open water World Championships were held in Lake Windermere in England. And the Irish selectors decided that they would send a relatively big team of 4 swimmers, and they decided to send me. Now, part of the reason was, I was young, I was up and coming. I mean, the other part is that literally in those days, I mean, you begged, you borrowed, you stole, you begged, borrowed, stole, like, kit, the money to kind of get over there. So I got over to England, and it was fascinating because there was 35 different countries represented.
Wow.
The American team were there, and they had 4 swimmers. They had 4 coaches. They had a head coach. They were staying in the 5-star luxury hotel. The carpet was thicker in the hotel than the bedroll I was sleeping on in the campsite with my mum and dad, and no coach. What was fascinating, however, is that not a single American swimmer finished.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the 25K. And look, they had everything. And for me, it was a real life lesson because they just had everything, but they didn't make it. Whereas what the Irish team had is, we were hungry, we had worked hard, we had that determination, we had that grit. Yeah, we didn't have all of the flash gear, we didn't have all of the flash coaches, but, we actually ended up performing better. So I ended up finishing that swim 9th. So I always joke with my kids that I was once in the world top 10. But
nice. I love that.
Never to be repeated. But anyway, then actually those other swimmers from all these different countries said to me, look, if you can do this swim, you can swim the English Channel. And I was like, really? Because actually no Irish woman had ever swum the English Channel. And there was only one Irish person had ever swum it, and they'd swum it in 1972. And I was looking to swim it in 1987, so there's quite a gap. And look, back in those days as well, for those of you that are listening that are old enough to remember, I mean, there was no internet, there was no Facebook groups. It was actually really difficult to get information. So the breakthrough for me was going to those World Championships and meeting all these other swimmers who then said to me, you can do it. And then I thought, well, I'll give it a go. And I did. And, I ended up making it across and was the first Irish woman to swim the English Channel. And that's something that obviously I'm incredibly proud of, but also it's really lovely because it means that I have that forever.
Definitely, it's such an achievement, and also I guess the learnings and the journey that we were talking about, it just stays with you forever, and you can kind of use it in any other field of life, which is something that I love about open water swimming, that there are things that you can use in your day-to-day, everyday kind of struggles or life.
Yeah. And look, I mean, so for me, I mean, I probably at the time didn't realise, I'm now 52, I swam that at 17, you're right, the learnings have actually, shaped my life really significantly in a way that you kind of think, oh, it was just a swim. But there's probably two that I'd probably highlight. One was the English Channel's really busy. Lots of people want to swim it. I was actually the 4th swimmer with my pilot on the tide. So I didn't even understand all this. I didn't understand there was a queue. I just thought you turned up and you'd be top of the list. And who else would want to swim this thing, But what happened was the pilot, when he spoke to me, he said to me, look, are you prepared to go on a day that's not perfect? And even at 17, I thought, well, actually, if I wait for the perfect day, I may never get in. And I said to him, actually, I am prepared to go on a day that's not perfect. Well, the 3 people in front of me had all said, no, we want the perfect day. So I went from number 4, literally, to number 1. And I mean, I just think that was a huge life lesson, because actually there never is a perfect day.
That is
Doesn't
correct.
matter what you do. There's never a perfect day. But it's far better to say, well, let's get on with it and give it a go. Now, the day wasn't perfect. The first 3 hours were a nightmare. Really, really rough. My father threw up. My brother threw up. They had to be tied to the boat for their own safety. Luckily, they were vomiting on the other side of the boat that I was swimming. It was really, really rough. And what happened was, after about 3 hours of swimming, and I was pretty fast, 17 was pretty fit and fast, and I thought, I wonder how far I've gone. And I turned around and I looked back, and in England you've got, the White Cliffs of Dover. They're absolutely huge. And the reality was I hadn't gone very far because the weather had been so bad. And then you look at these cliffs and they're huge. And it looks like you haven't gone very far. And it was almost a soul-destroying moment. And then I realised, look, I can't waste energy worrying about how far I've come. I've just got to get on with the task at hand. But again, it was another great life lesson around, like, don't spend your energy looking back, because you can't do anything about it. You are where you are in the moment. Kind of enjoy it if you can.
Yeah.
And, think forward.
That is so beautiful, because I think open water swimming it's about that as well, like just being in the now and not wasting your energy in thinking about all the other things that happen around you.
Yeah.
And this is also one of the things that fascinates me, how people, or in this case you, how you deal with your brain in those long swims when weather is rough and you see the cliffs and you go like, oh my goodness, this is I'm still here, how am I gonna make it? How do you deal with it? What do you think about if you do something special to kind of deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is you need to be in a really good mindset before you get into the big swim. And the mental preparation is probably as much in some ways as the physical preparation. So, I mean, I recently swam Forcen-Vazquez Strait. That was Stewart Island to Bluff, at the bottom of the South Island in New Zealand. And, when Philip Rush rang me to say on the Monday that we might go on the Thursday, I actually was close to tears, and I thought my head's not in the right space. So, I think actually recognising where you're at and then thinking, well, why is it not in the right space? How do you get it in the right space? So I did some pretty emotionally, big heavy lifting over those 3 days to get myself in the right space. I mean, I reflected on what I was worried about. I also, I do have a faith, which I think is really helpful. So, I kind of prayed about it as well, and I, did some reading around it. Then I think when you're in the water, it is that thing about being in the moment. And the big thing for me with Fovo was first 5 hours were actually quite nice weather-wise. Lots of jellyfish, which wasn't so pleasant, and I did get stung a couple of times. But then at about 12 o'clock, suddenly the sun disappeared, fog arrived, it became choppy. And what I kept thinking was, well, it changed so quickly. Hopefully it can change back quite quickly. So let's not worry about it, because, anything can change. So I think that's one of the things is I tend not to think too far ahead in the swims. I think, focus on the moment, focus where you are. And because I think if you think about it all too much in terms of, oh my God, I have 5 hours to go or 10 hours to go, you can become overwhelmed. So I just kind of focus on the next feed, think about my stroke, and also try to enjoy it. I mean, because I had some wonderful nature, for example, in Fovo. I mean, the jellyfish are wonderful nature. I didn't like the fact they stung me, but they look so magnificent in the water. The water itself was an incredibly clear, bluey colour that I hadn't experienced before. I mean, I had an albatross, kind of see it flew over me. Later on in the swim, I mean, it was amazing. I had dolphins. But, there is actually a lot going on, and a lot to keep focused on. I mean, you have to keep focused on the boat, keep focused on your stroke, keep focused on direction. So, yeah, I find it's quite almost zen-like. You get into quite a limited amount of thinking, and just really trying to enjoy the moment where you can.
I love that. I love that you can, just kind of look around and enjoy what you like. Actually the very special thing that you're doing, and in such a special place as well. I love Fovo, and I think it is such a great piece of water.
Yep.
And I think that is so beautiful. Because sometimes we get entangled in our thoughts, and then we miss what is going on around, and it's so beautiful. And I guess also you need to be fit enough to be able to enjoy.
Yes, fit enough and not in pain is probably
exactly.
And that's where I think coming back into quite big swimming after some years of not swimming at a kind of high level or long distances, it has been a bit of a journey for me to learn, well, what works for my body in my 50s compared to what worked for my body in my kind of, teens and 20s. So what was great for me about Fovo, because I'd done Lake Taupo the year before, and Lake Taupo was a bit more of a learning journey in terms of what works, because I hadn't done a big swim since I'd swum the Cook Strait in 2001, and then I was doing Lake Taupo in 2021. So, 20 years between big swims. What was great about Fovo was I kind of got all the lessons from Lake Taupo, and my body did fall apart a bit after Lake Taupo, particularly my shoulders. But at Fovo, I had my training down pat. I ended up with no injuries. Definitely was pretty tired near the end, but a good tired. And, I knew that my body was still able to manage. So I never got to that point where I thought, I wonder, is something going to give out? So that did enable me actually to really enjoy the moment. Whereas I have to say, I really loved Lake Taupo, probably for the first 32 Ks. Then the last 8 Ks were probably more focused on the fact that my shoulders were very sore.
Yeah, exactly. Well, for the listeners to know that Lake Taupo is 40.2 K, right? It's the biggest body of water, the fresh water in New Zealand.
Yeah.
So that is a huge swim, and it can get challenging. And
yeah, it can also get rough. And I mean, yes, it took me 14 hours, 49 minutes. So it's the longest time I've ever been in a swim. I mean, FOVO was 12 hours 27. So yeah, I think that extra couple of hours.
Yeah, it does. It does make a difference.
Particularly in the fresh water, you know, because you're not quite as buoyant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we had a bit of chop near the end, which I think changes the way that you're looking and raising your head. So, but anyway, I still loved that swim. It was great.
Yeah, I think Taupo is also such a special place in New Zealand. It's it's a great scenery and
yeah,
yeah
it is.
Wow, I am very inspired. I'm very blown away. So I also want you to tell me about a story that I hear about crossing crossing Cook Strait.
Oh, yes.
Because I have this irrational fear, and every time I get in the water, there's something in my brain that triggers that thought of being eaten by a shark.
Yeah.
And I heard this story, and I was like, oh my God, I need to hear it from here.
Yeah.
Please tell me what happened when you were swimming Cook Strait.
Yeah, so Cook Strait was a really interesting swim for me. So I was meant to swim Cook Strait in 2000, and actually, if you look at the swimming records, nobody swam it in 2000. I didn't even get in the water. So, you know, you kept getting the call saying maybe tomorrow, and then no, the weather's not good. Anyway, so I actually had ended up training for like 18 months. Anyway, 2001 came along. Philip had rung me a couple of times to say maybe the next day. And that didn't happen. And then it was kind of third time lucky. So he rang me and headed down to Wellington. At the time I was living in Rotorua. And I got in the water and it was just a terrible day. So the forecast said that the wind was going to go north to south. About an hour into the swim, the wind turned direction. It was wind against tide. It was like a washing machine. My poor husband was on the boat. He was as white as a sheet. He was losing his breakfast, lunch and dinner. And at the time, again, you know, I was relatively fast. I thought it would take me about 8 to 9 hours. And at about 8 hours, like I still had loads of time to go. I remember asking Phil, you know, how much further have I got to go? And he said, about 4.5 hours. Now, the thing I love about Philip's always really honest with you, which I think is incredibly important in these swims. Anyway, it's about 8 hours. It's starting to get a little bit kind of dusky. It's around 6 o'clock. And I'm swimming along. And the next thing is the IRB that Philip was in alongside me just suddenly puts on a bit of speed. I mean, it was quite close to me, but it came really close to me. They just grabbed me very unceremoniously kind of on my bottom and my neck and just pulled me out of the water. So obviously I thought, we obviously have a problem. And the problem was that there had been a shark that was circling. Now I didn't see it. Philip obviously saw it. My husband saw it. My husband, who already was relatively stressed, you know, then saw a man with a gun pointing at his wife, you know, because they were pointing at the shark. Then the rules in the Cook Strait are that because you're not in a shark cage, and if you're at risk of, you know, imminent danger, which they obviously thought that I was. And I mean, Philip talks about being able to see the shark's teeth.
Oh my goodness.
Thankfully,
no.
I didn't
see
the shark's teeth. But so you're out of the water. You're allowed to stay out of the water for up to 10 minutes, but you're not allowed to be under any power. So what happened was actually, because the wind was going a certain direction, I actually moved backwards about 800 meters. Then at about 6 or 7 minutes, a bunch of porpoises came through, and Philip said to me, porpoises and dolphins and sharks don't share the same water. Apparently that might not actually be true, but I have never really investigated that. And what then happened was I actually had a little bit of what I would call almost an out-of-body experience, where I could almost see myself and the crew, you know, on the boat. Because Philip said to me, are you going to get back in? And I became quite detached, and I thought, well, you know what? Like, I've waited 18 months to do this swim. I've had about 5 phone calls saying it might be tomorrow. And I could stop swimming now, and I could be here in 18 months' time in the same situation, or not be able to get back in. So, and what I realised was that actually my only job was to swim. it wasn't my responsibility to keep me safe. It wasn't my responsibility to set the direction. It wasn't my responsibility to pick the day. My only job was to swim. And actually, if I didn't do my job, nobody else had their job either. So I dived back into the water, and I got to the South Island about 4.5 hours later, and I've still got, I know listeners can't see me, but I've got 2 arms and 2 legs and no prosthetics. And, you know, the shark obviously went away or decided I wasn't very tasty. But again, that was a wonderful life lesson in terms of, you know, what is the job that you have to do that nobody else can do, and what do you have to do that other people are relying on you to do? And sometimes it's quite simple. And yeah, my job was to swim, and yeah, so I swam to the end, and I've got a really good story. And so has Philip. He's got a very good story too. He tells it far better than me, because he actually saw the shark. Thank God I didn't.
That is a wonderful story indeed. Like, I am so impressed, and I think I'm going to keep it in my brain every time I get in the water and I get a little bit scared. I'm going to think of you and say, okay, it's all good. I only have to swim. Yeah, so I with this waiting for 10 months, how do you prepare for so long?
Yeah.
How do you make sure that you're always kind of ready to go? Like,
yeah, look, I think sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. I think you have to be reasonable, and you do definitely need to have some downtime. So what is quite good, at least with the open water swims, you know when the next tides are coming up, so you can kind of go, okay, I can take a bit of an easier week. I think it is really, really hard. And I think it's something I've got better at as I've got older. So I know, again, back to the North Channel, I had a really long waiting period for a North Channel attempt. And I definitely didn't keep myself at the top of my game. It just, you know, just kind of grind me down. So I think, again, that's something that I've kind of learned with age, and you can't, you do need to listen to your body. You do need to give yourself a break, but you also need to be very conservative at the end of the day. You know, you need to focus on sleeping well, eating well, not heading out and partying. You know, and so there are a lot of sacrifices that you have to make, but, you know, do maybe try and do some nice things that you think, well, I couldn't have done if I was, you know, going to go next week, you know, so maybe it's go to the cinema or go out for a nicer dinner or something. But it's pretty hard, actually. I think it's probably one of the hardest things in open water swimming, waiting for that date and trying to train for a date that you don't know. It's particularly difficult in New Zealand, I think, particularly difficult in the Cook Strait. And what I do notice about the Cook Strait, it's more challenging than other bodies of water because of the inconsistency of the weather. And that can be really soul destroying for swimmers. And it's one of the things that I think is also great about Wellington and actually the New Zealand swimming community. We all understand the challenges of the weather and the challenges that you just can't go, oh, I'm going next Tuesday. So we support each other through that. So I think having a really good swimming community really helps. But I actually probably think that waiting and that uncertainty and the unknown is one of the most difficult parts of particularly channel swimming attempts, and particularly the Cook Strait.
Definitely, because uncertainty is crazy. Like, you don't know, and you are just waiting there to see. And 10 months is a long time. It's like, it's a long time to be prepared and to do sacrifices, and also like, with all the training that you have to do, how do you manage to juggle all the pieces of your life? Because there are so many different things that you have to make fit, like the pieces of the puzzle, just to make them work together. How do you manage that?
Yeah, well, I think I'm very fortunate. I've got a fabulous husband. I've got lovely parents. So my mum and dad have been actively involved in all of my swims since I started. And they were on the boat on the English Channel, and they were on the boat at Fovo, you know, kind of 30, 40 years later. So they've been on all of the swims. I mean, it really helps now that my kids are a bit older. And actually, Fovo, it was the first time one of my kids ever came on one of the boats, and that was very special. A couple of the others did want to come on the boats, but they get badly seasick, so we decided it wasn't a good idea. Maybe not. But I think, you know, being quite disciplined, and also just being reasonable about what you can and can't do, what you can and can't take on. I mean, the other great thing about open water swimming is, you do have those peaks of training, so people know that, look, they really need to lean in and support you, but it's not forever. It's not, every day of every month of every year. I think just, it's about making those little choices every day and then making the most of the time that you've got to do other things. So, hang out with kids or get ahead of your work and, good planning. I think good planning is really, really important. And then you can kind of fit things in and also do them well. So I think that's probably another area that I've got much better at as I've got older, because I've needed to plan more. Because, when you're 17, you really only need to worry about yourself and your mum and dad feed you and, clothe you and all the rest of it. But now you've got more things to worry about. You need to plan better, and also your body doesn't train maybe as well, so you need to plan better. So I've really enjoyed actually that journey for myself, because I think again it goes into other parts of life where you're able to plan better and you can see the benefit, because you can get a lot more out if you plan.
Yeah, definitely. And it makes me so happy to hear that with age you get wiser. And
in some areas maybe.
Yeah, well, I'm just gonna say that we get wiser. It makes me really happy to hear that, and also to see that open water swimming is a sport that you can take with you for a long time, because I just think that it's a fantastic thing and very inspiring.
No, I think it's a great sport. It's a great community. I love the way it brings people together from all walks of life, all age groups, and everybody's actually a winner on the day.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that always struck me. Even I remember doing a swim in Ireland, and I was, again, about 14 or 15. And I remember the man that came 8th on that swim. And I remember the way his kid looked at him and went, "Oh my goodness, my daddy just swam around that lighthouse. Isn't my daddy amazing?" And I thought he was the winner on the day. And that's the great thing about open water swimming. Everybody is actually a winner. And because you don't have that, I think, a different angle to the competition, you get a much more collaborative, supportive community that enables more and more people to be the best they can be.
Yeah, and actually I can see that the open water swimming community is growing as well, because it's such an inclusive and such a supportive community in sport that, as you said, like everyone is a winner, right? If you step into the water, you have already won the day, and you have already won whatever you're attempting to do. So I think that is a fantastic and heartwarming thing. And that's why also I love this sport that much. And what is next?
Oh, well, what's next is, I've mentioned it earlier, when I was younger I tried to swim from Ireland to Scotland. I didn't make it because of jellyfish the first time, and actually the second time I didn't make it was, I would say, due to my poor planning. I sadly got pulled out a kilometre from the finish with hypothermia. So I've decided that it's third time lucky,
yes.
And at the ripe old age of 52, I shall head over and give it another go. Now, the great thing about that is that the swim starts actually where I grew up in Bangor. And the boatman who was with me over 30 years ago is going to be my boatman. And so he'll be the pilot, and the crew that were on the boat all want to come back for the swim.
Wow.
One of them, was 15. He's got a bit older, just like me. So again, I just think, that's a wonderful basis on which to start. That everybody there really wants you to succeed. Also that, you bonded during what potentially people would see as a failure, and, 30 to plus years later, the relationships are still there. People are actually, giving up days off work, kind of traveling to be on the boat to support me. So June this month, that is the really, really big heavy training month, and then the my tide dates are the end of July and the start of August. So I mean, it's a very, very difficult swim.
Why is that?
Well, it's pretty long. It's a bit longer. It's longer than Fovo. It's longer than the Cook Strait. It's longer than the English Channel. Yeah, so it's about 34 kilometres, but you always end up swimming a bit more. It's very cold. So, it's about 14 degrees, and that's on a good day. It's tidal. It also has some pretty horrible jellyfish. So The good thing about the swim now is that when I tried it a long time ago, there was only 6 people had ever done it. It had never been done on a first attempt, so there wasn't a lot known about the body of water. I think again now there's a bit more known about it. More people have actually successfully crossed it. So hopefully all of that knowledge, including my knowledge of what works for me as a swimmer, kind of will compensate for the fact that I'm a bit older and a bit slower now, and will. Fingers crossed. It'll be a big family adventure. Actually, 3 of my kids are coming over to Ireland with me. My mum and dad are coming over. Aoife, who was on the boat in Fova, wants to be on the boat again. And a couple of the other kids might come on the boat too. They're going to, again, work on that seasickness.
Yes. Wow, that is very exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very exciting. So... yeah, and I think again, regardless of what happens, it'll have been a journey. I mean, that's a journey that probably started actually just after I saw on the English Channel, because I started to think about doing that after the English Channel. So that was at the age of 17 and now 52. So it's been something that's been kind of present in my life, either at a kind of subconscious level or a very direct level for a very long time. So I think it's going to be a very interesting journey to reflect on, and probably one of the longest journeys of a swim.
Yeah, it's a long journey, but I'm pretty sure it will go fantastic. And as you said, regardless what happens, it's such a great adventure. And
yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully in maybe 3 or 4 months I can just interview you again to tell me all about it.
Absolutely. Would love to.
Cool. I have only just one last question. How do you cope with cold?
I think frequent swimming, I believe, is really helpful. So for me, I don't think it's necessarily spending a long time, but it's doing it frequently. So that was definitely when I was training in Ireland, when I first started open water swimming, and I probably didn't take to the cold particularly well, and I was very skinny, but I would go in very frequently. I think then, then building up in terms of time. But what I would say is it's better to do kind of 3 or 4 1-hour swims a week than to do 1 4-hour swim in a week. But yeah, I mean, the other thing I think is really important is your nutrition. So I think I'm a great believer in hot drinks, warm drinks. So particularly a warm drink before you go in, and making sure that there's something that you have eaten. I think is really important. So those are the 2 kind of tips I have for coping with the cold.
Good. I like those. It makes me also happy to know that can be kind of trained. Yes. Well, thank you very much. That was fantastic. That was very inspiring, and all the best for your next adventure. As I said, maybe in 3 or 4 months we can talk again and you can tell me all about it.
Would love to. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Swim in the Strait podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our podcast, connect on social media @Swim in the Strait, and leave us a rating on your favorite podcast platform.